Chapter 11. Calamity. Personal, Family, and National Crisis, 1966 to 1971. Throughout elementary school, private moments with my father became increasingly infrequent. Whenever we were together, our exchanges felt more confrontational than connected. His disappointed gaze, his sharp remarks, and even his silence seemed to pierce deeper. Reflecting on this, I suspect it stemmed from the incident in kindergarten when I wrote "Oppose Chairman Mao" on the ground. Due to the party's policy of guilt by association, my impulsive action likely significantly impacted my father's career. However, I was unaware of the extent of that impact at that young age. What I truly grasped was his coldness, and it terrified me. Initially, I sought his approval, but over the years it became clear that such efforts were in vain. I struggled to articulate my feelings and defend myself, eventually choosing silence. Yet this very silence seemed to provoke him even more. It felt like we were two tigers confined on the same mountain, constantly circling one another, unwilling to give in. My mother, consistently gentle and patient, attempted to mediate, but her efforts were largely ineffective. She never once argued with my father except for that one night. I don't remember exactly what I did wrong that day. Perhaps I borrowed something without asking, told a little lie, or snuck a treat. But my dad was upset. His anger flared up quickly and remained unrelenting. Initially, he spoke to me in a stern tone. Then he picked up a wooden ruler, gripping it firmly as he lightly tapped my palms. 1 hit, 2 hits, over and over. My mother sat silently nearby, watching. At first, it seemed as if she accepted his discipline and agreed I deserved this punishment. But then, my father moved from my hands to my backside. The strikes grew harder, sharper. My mother shifted in her seat, visibly uncomfortable.
"Could you hit him a little lighter?"
she pleaded softly.
"He's just a child."
"If I hit him lightly, he'll do it again next time. Look at him, he's not even crying,"
my father snapped, his frustration deepening. He raised the ruler higher. Then, my mother did something unprecedented. She stood up. Tears filled her eyes, and her voice quivered as she spoke.
"If you keep beating him like this, are you going to beat him to death? How am I supposed to live?"
For the first time, I witnessed my mother cry for me, not just tears, but a protest. I had always perceived her as quiet, obedient, and enduring. Yet now, she was standing up to my father because of me. A part of me shattered. I had let my mother down, and in my youthful mind, I believed I had destroyed her life. That night shifted something within me. Although my father's anger left me deeply hurt, rather than seeking to repair our relationship, I allowed my resentment to grow. If he believed I was bad, then I would act that way. I began acting out, stealing, sneaking cigarettes, and testing limits to vent my frustration. The Cultural Revolution stripped away warmth and humanity, subjecting teachers to humiliation and violence, turning families against each other, and draining Shanghai of its spirit, making the city a stage for endless conflict. My clashes with my father somewhat mirrored this turbulent environment. Around 1968 or 1969, my mother was sent to the May 7th Cadre School, a labor re-education camp on the outskirts of Shanghai. While my father remained engaged in his re-education at the pickle factory, trampling vegetables in massive vats, I accompanied my mother to the Cadre School. I often wandered alone along the lonely beaches, observing fishermen as they caught crabs and loaches. A sense of aimlessness often enveloped me like a child lost without a home. Returning home from camp on a humid summer afternoon, I walked back from school on Yongsheng Road when the familiar sound of gongs and synchronized slogans caught my attention. Initially, it seemed like just another political demonstration, a continuation of the ongoing struggle against someone else. However, my heart began to race as I approached my home doorstep. A vivid red big character notice was prominently displayed outside my home. I stopped, and everything around me fell into an unsettling silence. It was announced that my father had officially been vindicated. To me, this represented the true cruelty and absurdity of the Cultural Revolution. One day you could be branded as an enemy, subjected to condemnation and humiliation, and crushed under the force of political persecution. Then, the next day, you were reinstated, proclaimed innocent, as if none of your suffering had ever occurred. And no one questioned it. No one dared to. Even when the system addressed its own errors, it was seen as another example of greatness forever esteemed, glorious, and undeniably correct. However, even following his vindication, my father failed to learn his lessons. Instead, he grew increasingly resolute in demonstrating his unwavering loyalty to the party. When the government called upon people for blood donations, he was one of the first to step up and volunteer. However, after donating blood, he refused to take a break. Instead, he immersed himself in work with greater fervor, as if propelled by an invisible force, driving his already fatigued body beyond its limits. My mother watched helplessly, consumed by anxiety. In desperation, she cooked endless pots of pork knuckles simmered with brown sugar and sweet red dates, hoping their rich nutrition would restore his faded strength. Yet no matter how much she fed him, it was never enough. Something deeper was broken. A few months later, my father collapsed, gravely ill. After a series of tests, the doctors confirmed the worst: leukemia, a death sentence. The news devastated our family. Dad was admitted to the hospital. My mother lost her ability to focus on anything. Each day after school, I joined her at the hospital. I quietly observed my father's deterioration, sitting beside him, assisting with tasks, and absorbing the cadences of hospital life. My father's physician, Dr. Wu Yang, was a renowned leukemia specialist at Renji Hospital. He employed a blend of Chinese and Western medicine, which appeared effective for some time. Within a couple of months, my father improved enough to be discharged. But deep down I felt numb. The man who had once been so strong disciplined me with an iron grip and worked tirelessly for our family was now slipping away before my eyes. I felt utterly powerless to stop it. When my father's health improved temporarily, he spent most of his time resting at home. One afternoon, upon returning from school, I was shocked to discover him in bed, crying. I stood still. I had never seen my father cry before, not once. He held a letter, his hands trembling as his tears soaked into the blanket. I hesitated, unsure if I should speak. Finally, my mother whispered to me outside of my dad's sight.
It's from your aunt from Taiwan.
My aunt. The letter was from Hong Kong after a lengthy trip from Taiwan. My aunt left for Taiwan before the communist takeover in 1949, when my father was just 16. Due to this overseas connection, my father was regarded as suspicious and never permitted to join the Communist Party. That rejection was a subtle yet painful wound for someone like him, eager to progress and demonstrate his loyalty. As he read her words, I envisioned the tumult of emotions within him. His life had been shattered. His unwavering loyalty to Chairman Mao felt like a betrayal. His cherished brother and sister stood with the enemy, and now he faced death. The anguish must have been overwhelming. Following that day, his health deteriorated swiftly. By early 1971, he had returned to the hospital. Aside from the hours dedicated to school, I remained at his side. Yet I realized in my heart that I wasn't there for him. I was there for my mom. My father had never expressed affection. He had merely endured my presence. Now, as he approached death, I understood that he did not wish for me to be by his side. But my mom did. One afternoon in May 1971, I returned home from school to discover my favorite cousin, Huili, the daughter of my eldest uncle, waiting for me. It was her first visit to our house.
"Little Feng,"
she said, her gentle voice trembling.
"we have to go to the hospital. Dad is probably about to leave."
I frowned. Leave? Leave where? She didn't answer. Upon our arrival, the hospital room brimmed with relatives. A dense silence enveloped us, occasionally broken by soft sobs. A few uncles glanced my way, their voices tremoring with sorrow.
"Little Feng, your father is about to leave. Do you understand?"
I didn't. Doctors rushed in and out, their movements frantic, yet resigned. The room echoed with cries and sobs, a desperate attempt to hold on to something already slipping away. At last, Dr. Ouyang arrived and spoke the words that shattered the quiet. The resuscitation attempt had failed. My father was gone. The screams that ensued were unlike anything I had ever experienced. Deep, throaty wails of grief resonating through the hospital halls. My mother sank into a chair, struggling for breath, while my cousins and aunts surrounded her, rubbing her back in a frantic effort to console her. Then she turned to me.
Little Feng, why aren't you crying?
She sobbed.
Your father has died, and you aren't even crying?
Her voice pierced through me. I remained motionless, unable to react. In my thoughts, I had lost my father long ago. Yet witnessing my mother's pain and hearing her grief turned into blame, and something within me broke. Tears began to fall. I felt overwhelming sorrow, not for my father, but for my mom. That night, I helped carry my father's body onto the gurney. I held his head while my cousin carried his feet. I was surprised that his body felt so light and so stiff. At the age of 12, I encountered death for the first time. My father, deeply devoted to my mother, left her in silence, departing alone and leaving behind his 3 young children, who still relied on him. That year, he was only 38. I was 12, my sister 10, and my brother 7. But how could my father be gone? What truly is death? Does it mean I will never see him again? Does it mean he has completely vanished, as if he never existed? How could someone so vibrant, commanding, and alive suddenly disappear? At 12, I struggled to understand it. The permanence of death felt unreal. Yet these questions haunted me for a long time. For the next decade, I frequently dreamed of my father. In these dreams, he always resembled his old self before the Cultural Revolution, cheerful, whistling, and making playful jokes. He would suddenly appear, walking through the door, rising from his hospital bed, standing beneath the ancient camphor tree in Yang family village, or gazing out at the ripples in the water at Qingshan Reservoir. And just as abruptly as he appeared, he would vanish. Every time I woke from these dreams, sorrow washed over me. The emptiness in my chest felt vast, endless. Sometimes I found my pillow damp with tears. In the silence that followed, I realized that no matter how much I dreamed, no matter how much I remembered, he was never coming back. This was a revelation so terrifying and earth-shattering that it seemed almost inconceivable. My father's passing dealt a crushing blow to my mother. For an extended period, she appeared adrift, as if her desire to live had vanished. In the days leading up to his death, I heard my dad tell Mom,
"I might not survive. You'll need to care for the kids all by yourself. It will be so difficult for you. I'm sorry."
My dad expressed his regrets to my mom, knowing he was dying. I felt immense sympathy for my parents. I cherished my mother and mourned her loss. Each day I made an effort to be near her, to show her that we, her kids, were still by her side, that we needed her, and that she still had a purpose to live. I observed her closely, fearful of her actions during her bleakest times. In the midst of my mother's suffering, I had an epiphany. I needed to transform myself. I could no longer afford to misbehave, create problems, or add to her stress. I needed to embrace the role of the eldest son, becoming the father figure my siblings required. I had to mature right away. The death of my father threw our family into financial turmoil. Previously, my parents' combined incomes allowed us to live comfortably by Shanghai's standards. However, with half of that income lost, my mother found it challenging to cover our expenses. She was diligent, maintaining thorough records of all expenditures. She started to involve me in our household budget, showing me how to maximize every penny. I accepted additional responsibilities running errands before school, preparing meals, cleaning the floors, and doing laundry. I contributed in every way possible to ease her burden, realizing that if something were to happen to my mother, the three of us would be left with nothing. A few months following my father's passing, school life resumed. One morning, like usual, we stood at our desks and recited our morning chant together as part of the Cultural Revolution ritual. Long live our great leader, Chairman Mao. Long live, long live, long, long live. Wishing wise leader Vice Chairman Lin good health and eternal well-being. During the break, some classmates, casting cautious glances, signaled me to join them in a secluded corner of the classroom. These weren't ordinary students. Some were children of influential official students whose parents were involved in municipal and district governance. They had insider information that never made it to the newspapers. In hushed voices, they shared something shocking with me.
Something has happened to Lin Biao.
I leaned in closer, my heart pounding.
Lin Biao is dead. He tried to kill Mao.
I felt as though the ground beneath me had shifted. Lin Biao, Mao's most trusted ally and the designated successor, noted in the party constitution, who held the title of Minister of Defense and effectively led the military, was dead. Not just deceased, but labeled a traitor, a conspirator, and an enemy of the very revolution he had significantly influenced. Lin Biao, another architect of Mao's personality cult, the figure behind the Little Red Book, and the man who once stood by Mao in the early days of the Cultural Revolution, raising his fist in unwavering loyalty, was now accused of staging a coup. It was claimed that he had conspired to assassinate Mao, betray the very leader he had ardently supported, and turn against the Cultural Revolution itself. For us, it struck like a bolt of lightning, splitting the sky apart. For Mao, the Communist Party, and the revolution, it signified an unimaginable disaster, a nightmare threatening to undo everything. From that moment on, Mao could no longer maintain the facade of stability. The belief in a strong, united revolution had disintegrated. Lin Biao's betrayal forced Mao into a desperate retreat, one he could never publicly acknowledge and recover from. He initiated secret talks with the United States, culminating in Nixon's landmark visit to China. The long sealed doors of the country began to open. Externally, Mao continued to champion the Cultural Revolution, but the fissures in the facade were growing increasingly apparent. Deng Xiaoping's subtle return in 1973 hinted at the early signs of a strategy to restore order. As I stood in the classroom, absorbing what I had just heard, my thoughts drifted to my father. He passed away just months before this moment. He went to his grave holding faith in Mao, in Lin Biao, and in the revolution that dominated his life. He remained unaware that the men he admired were engaged in a quiet, brutal conflict among themselves. He never realized that the revolution for which he sacrificed so much was merely a stage for betrayal. I wondered, what would he have thought if he had known? Would he have experienced the same sorrow and despair as I feel now? Would he have understood that his suffering, his downfall, and even his death were not merely personal tragedies but reflections of a more significant national crisis? I now see my family's destiny was never solely ours to bear. When I wrote "Oppose Chairman Mao" in kindergarten, our lives were forever intertwined with Mao's shadow. The tragedies in our home mirrored the more significant turmoil sweeping through China. Our misfortunes were not random. We had been swept up by the currents of history, overwhelmed by a force much stronger than us.